Hey, good morning, church. I'm super excited to bring you God's word today. Today, we are going to look at a story that's kind of long. What I want you to do is, I want you to grab your Bible, and I want you to turn to John chapter 11. Okay, as we read this story, I want to take it one scene at a time. If it's okay with you, there are a total of four scenes that we're going to look today. As we look at these four scenes, I want to read the scene, dissect the scene, and then continue on. And trust me, as we start to pull things apart within the story, you're going to realize that maybe this story has more than you thought it had. Maybe you've heard the story dozens of times and you're like, yeah, I already know the outcome. Ooh, you do. But part of following Jesus through the scriptures is not always knowing the outcome. Rather, that's not the goal. It's the journey through the story. That is why the gospel writers wrote what they wrote. They wanted us to experience and to live in the moment. So, any distractions, anything that are around you, or maybe you're at a place where you're like, I'm driving, or I'm just listening, but I'm kind of doing other things. Maybe try this time to put those things aside, or maybe try to find those distractions and set them aside and say, hey, I'm going to listen. And that's the main thing that I want you to do, is just kind of listen very closely. So, John chapter 11, let's begin. Now, a man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sisters sent a message to him, Lord, the one you love is sick. When Jesus heard it, he said, This sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after that, he said to the disciples, Let's go to Judea again. Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews try to stone you, and you're going there again? Aren't there 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. He said this, and then he told them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. Then the disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will get well. Jesus, however, was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about natural sleep. So Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe. So let's go to him. Then Thomas, called Didymus or twin, said to the fellow disciples, Let's go too, so that we may die with him. Scene 1. Here's what's going on within this story. First off, we're introduced to the main characters. We are told that there is a man that was very sick. His name is Lazarus, right? Lazarus has 2 sisters. So we're now starting to learn about the family dynamic. There is one named Martha, one named Mary. Now, there is something beautiful that the text tells us, a very important story, a story that, in fact, is written in other gospels, and it's because this specific situation with this specific lady was so imprinted upon the hearts of those who were following Jesus that they said, we are going to hold on to this story and tell others about it. So that's where you look at the first few verses. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So who is this? This is Mary. And they're getting very specific on which Mary they are referring to. So this Mary is the one that obviously anointed Jesus with perfume and also wiped his feet with her hair. Now that we know which one she is, we want to pay very close attention to something. 2 things. One, who is this man, Lazarus? By the way, that's a shortened version of Eleazar, okay? So Lazarus is kind of the nickname. The reason why we bring this up is because Lazarus' full name has a significance. It means God's help or God's assistance, which, again, that will do with the story later. Secondly, where is Lazarus? Well, he lives in the vicinity of Bethany, which is where his sisters live as well. Obviously, they all live together, which also is very significant because that means Lazarus is the main breadwinner, being that he is the male. He's got 2 sisters. He's probably providing for them. He lives in a city called Bethany. And Bethany, we normally think like, oh, that's a neat name for a city. I mean, I know people have been named, yes, but it's the name that's significant. Bethany means the house of suffering. Ooh. And you're like, wow. All of this plays into the way that John is writing this story. So he tells us, listen, this man Lazarus was sick. The two sisters decided to send a message. Why? Because there is a relationship already happening between Lazarus and his two sisters and Jesus. They're not just acquaintances, like they know one another, okay? They've been hanging out with one another. There's definitely a strong bond. They knew that if they sent a message to the Lord, that he would be able to respond to the fact that Lazarus was sick. And apparently his sickness was pretty bad. So they send a message. The message gets to Jesus. What does Jesus respond? He says, this sickness that Lazarus had is not going to end in death. Okay. So you're thinking, okay, well then let's get going. Well, here's the issue. Prior to this story, we are told that Jesus was hanging out in the area of Judea, and there was so much opposition against him that it got to the point where they were trying to capture him and murder him. They're trying to kill him. The last situation that you know of, they were willing to grab rocks and throw them at Jesus until he's basically dead. He escapes. In the process, now they are furthest away they can be away from Judea. Bethany happens to be in that region. So what does Jesus say? He goes, listen, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death, which is interesting because you're like, how does that not? And anyway, he says it's not going to end in death, but instead, what is the purpose of everything that's going on? What is the bigger picture? He says, this is so that his sickness will bring glory to me, the Son of Man, and to the Father. Interesting. There's Jesus again using that beautiful term that is found in Daniel chapter 7, Son of Man, the one who walks up to the Ancient of Days, right? So a reference to who he really is. The disciples then start to have this conversation, which I want to draw your attention into. He reminds them, listen, this situation is for the glory of the Son, right? So then he goes, okay, looks at his disciples and goes, let's go to Judea again. That's where the disciples go, oh, wait, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, what are you thinking? And yes, this is in fact, and I want you to this is one of those minor points, but it's significant enough for us to pause. The disciples are arguing with Jesus. Like, just wrap your head around that. Why do we argue with the one who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords? I don't know. I really don't. It's just silly that we do this. But here the disciples are, again, the gospel writers want to show them how they really are. They're arguing with Jesus, going, what is wrong with you? We just ran away from a situation where people were trying to kill you. They're trying to stone you. No, we're not going back to Judea. Why would you want to? So then what does Jesus say? He starts to speak in kingdom language. He starts to do that riddle thing again, okay? Jesus goes, listen, I need to go see Lazarus because he is asleep and I am on my way to wake him up. So we read this and we go, oh, I know what's happening because I already read the story. I know. But I want you to put yourself in the feet, in the sandals of these disciples. What are they hearing? They're hearing he is asleep. And the word for sleep has two meanings. By the way, this is such a John thing or Johannine way of theology. And it's also a Jesus thing, honestly. He will always speak in riddles where there are two different meanings going on, or could be two meanings. In this case, the word sleep was a very Jewish traditional way of saying somebody died. But the word for sleep also means somebody's asleep. So he goes, listen, Lazarus is asleep, so I'm going to go wake him up. They're hearing he's resting because he was sick. So one, let's not go there so we don't die, okay, so that the people of Judea don't attack us again. And two, it's one of those, Lord, this is how people get better. Like, they sleep. It's okay. Just let them sleep. So that's why they look at him going, well, why do we need to go there? Just let him rest. His body will get better. That's when Jesus goes, okay, no more riddles. I'm just going to tell him the fact. So he looks at him and goes, listen, Lazarus is dead. I want to highlight something to you. When Jesus found out that Lazarus was sick, it says his response, because it is somebody that he loved, was to wait 2 more days. Can I tell you the distance it takes from where he's at to go back to Judea to the little town called Bethany? It takes a 2-day journey. So for him to wait 2 days and then take 2 days to get there, how many days is that? 4. We will get to that in a minute, why Jesus would do that. But for right now, it kind of sounds terrible, okay? Let's be real. Let's be honest. Jesus, why? You could have left in that moment and things could have possibly changed. Maybe the outcome. We're going to get to that. So here Jesus decides, I wait longer. He tells his disciples, listen, he's dead. Okay, so no more riddles. He uses the word for death. He is dead. And then he looks at them and goes, and you should be grateful that I wasn't there, so that what happens, in other words, the outcome will be for not only the glory of God, but also so that you will believe, meaning you will learn something about me and trust in me. What I love is the ending of this scene. We have Thomas. Now, let's be real. Thomas is given a terrible rap throughout the Gospels because he's doubting Thomas, because he's blah, blah, blah. Can I tell you guys something? First off, yes, Thomas vocalizes things that we're all thinking, okay? So let's be real. He's no different than us. The only difference is that he's a straight shooter. Like, he says things as he's thinking them. You don't have to guess what he means. But then he does something beautiful, and he does this even when he doubts, when he has a moment where he's like, if I can stick my hand into Jesus' side, what does he do? He's still a beautiful, obedient disciple because he looks to his fellow disciples and goes, well, let's go with Jesus so that we too can die. Two things that he's saying. One, he's being real, and he's saying, we're about to go back to Judea, which means that we're probably going to die there along with Jesus, and Lazarus is already dead as is. So then this is the end. But, did he say, let's stay here? No. Did he say, you know what, I think it's a better idea if I stay back, you guys can go, that's your decision if you want to die? No. What does he say? Let's go. That, my dear friends, you may have a difference of opinion with Jesus' plan, but a true disciple says, you know what, I don't really see this as a great idea, and I don't see how this is going to be good, let alone for me, let alone for others. But if Jesus wants to, now let's go. Thomas did a beautiful thing here. Scene 2. Turn in your Bibles and we'll read it together. When Jesus arrived, he found Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days, and we'll get to why that's significant. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. Many of the Jews who had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. So now they have people visiting because of the funeral procession. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. Why does this matter? So now Jesus arrives. This is scene 2. Jesus arrives into Bethany, and he has found out, oh, Lazarus died 4 days ago. Why does that matter? Because it was Jewish belief that when a person dies, their soul hangs out around the body, hoping to come back to life, maybe, possibly, like if this person, resuscitates or something, then the soul doesn't leave. But that only happens for 3 days. Once we go into day 4, that spirit moves on to Sheol, and there is no hope of this person ever coming back. Jesus shows up, it's day 4, then guess what? Spirit's gone. The soul of Lazarus is gone. When he shows up, he knows that the 2 sisters are there, but Mary stays in the house. Martha runs to him. And Martha does this, why? Because she wants to meet him outside of the city. And what does she say? And I want to highlight this because you're going to hear this twice. Martha says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. What is she saying? She's not saying, this is your fault. If only you had been who you said you were, he wouldn't have died. No. She's not saying that. Neither sister says that. They're just stating the facts that, listen, Jesus, if you had been here, then maybe the outcome would have been different. Maybe he wouldn't have died. But she says something beautiful. But I know now, whatever you ask God, He's going to give it to you. Now, that's not her thinking, if you ask Him to come back to life, then He'll come back to life. No, 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 no. She's thinking Jewish thoughts, logical thoughts that say, it's day 4. I am embracing the outcome and the truth. He is gone. But where He is, Jesus, that's up to you. That's what she's saying. If you had been here, maybe He wouldn't have died. But for right now, He is dead. But I know that if you talk to the Father where He is in eternity, you can put in a good word. You can change that reality. You can talk to the Father, and whatever you ask the Father, that's where Lazarus will be. So she's looking at it going, you're the one that's in control on that side of death. Eternal life. That's a you thing. So I'm going to leave that up to you. Jesus responds with, hey, He's going to rise again. And she hears that. Again, it's that double meaning. She hears that meaning, no. Like the Pharisees believed in this. The Sadducees didn't, which is why they're sad, you see. Ha ha ha. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection. The Sadducees did not. The Pharisees believed that there was going to be a last day, and upon that last day, those who trusted in God would be brought back to life to be with Him for eternity. So Jesus goes, He will rise again. And she goes, I know. See, it's the thank you. That means so much to my heart, because you're reminding me that upon the last day, I'm not going to lose my brother forever. He's going to come back to life. Yes, Jesus, you're absolutely right. Upon the last day, He's coming back. And Jesus looks at her straight into her soul and says, I am the resurrection. I am the life. Anyone who trusts in me will not die. Even if they do die, they're going to live. And even those who trust in me, they're never going to die anyway. They will live forever. So He's looking at her going, you think that is a last days reality, which is true. But that last days has decided to try and time travel. It's here now. You're looking at Him. It's not a theological concept. It is a person, and He's in front of you. Why? Because Jesus is going to do something amazing in a few days. And He knows this is the last miracle that is going to show you that my powers are incredible. And 2, my mission. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get to that. I can't get ahead of myself. But He says this, listen, I am the resurrection and the life. What does she respond? And I want you guys to realize, she says, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the one who is sent, the Son of God. Ooh, that's a beautiful term. She says Son of God, not Son of Man, which is Jesus' favorite. She says Son of God, because this is saying you are, in fact, the incarnate God that we love. You are His Son. You are the promised one. You are the Messiah. Does this mean that Martha's like, hey, I'm for this, like I'm having faith? No, not at all, folks. She is speaking theological truths that any Jewish person would say. She still doesn't understand something. Why is Jesus here? And I don't mean why is Jesus here in this specific situation only. It's the overarching truth. Why is Jesus here? One of the things that I love Jesus asked, do you believe this? We can't bypass this question, because it'll play into the conversation that we're about to have. Do you believe this? In other words, I am sharing with you this revelation. I am the resurrection and the life. But do you believe it? Hold on to that little nugget, because we're going to go back to it. Scene 3. Having said this, she went back and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here, and he is calling for you. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in a place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw that Mary got up quickly and went out. They went out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to cry there. These people, by the way, okay, we'll keep reading. Okay. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. There's that phrase again. When Jesus saw her crying, and the Jews who had come with her, crying. He was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. Lord, they told him, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Scene 3. Jesus shows up, and what happens? Martha now goes to Mary. Jesus is still hanging out in the outskirts of Bethany, right? Goes to Mary and goes, hey, the teacher is here and he's looking for you. She immediately runs. She runs out. Why does John tell us these facts? Because as she runs out, there is a slew of people who have no idea what that conversation was. They just see Mary get up and run. And what has she been doing? Crying. Who's been crying with her? All the people that were within the house. Specifically, all the Jews from Jerusalem, not all of them, but friends, okay? Jewish friends that were with her. Why does this matter? They are there to comfort her. They are there to cry with her. But there's also some who have been hired. They have been hired to cry. They have been hired to rip their shirts. They have been hired to be all emotional when they actually don't know the person. They're literally, you hire people during a funeral to come over and make a big deal out of it. It's a Jewish thing. So when she runs off, it says that all those people, friends, family, and hired people, run with her. Why? Because they're like, oh, she's probably going to go cry at Lazarus' tomb, so let's go with her, because that's what we're hired to do. If she's not here, let's go cry where she's crying. So they run off. They come to find Jesus, so she wasn't going to the tomb, and she falls at his feet and says, Lord, if you were here, my brother would not have died. That same response. And again, it's not them going, hey, Jesus, where were you? Like, you lied. You weren't here. No. She's not being mean, aggressive, or being offensive. She's just saying, maybe the outcome would have been different if you had been here. But I understand. So she just starts to state to him, hey, now, here's what's interesting. Jesus looks at her crying, looks at the family and relatives and friends crying, and then looks at the hired people. And it says that it moved him within his spirit and he was disturbed. How many of you are like, disturbed? I don't think I would have used that word. I would have been like emotional, crying, sentimental. Maybe he had like empathy where he's like, man, like they're really brokenhearted because Lazarus is dead. Can we back out of the story for a second? Okay, do you remember that Jesus has a plan? Okay. He already knows what the outcomes are. Yes, emotionally, he is invested. These are his friends. But he already knows how this thing is going to end. So the way we interpret verse 35 is really interesting. We say, well, because of him realizing, man, Mary's crying, the people are crying, the hired people are crying, and my buddy Lazarus is dead, and that's why Jesus wept. That would make no sense. You want to know why? Read the following verses. It says, the people that saw his emotional reaction were like, oh, look how much he loved Lazarus. And then everyone else was like, can I be real for a second? Like, he literally opened the eyes of the blind a few chapters earlier. Obviously, they're not thinking in chapters. But they're like, previously he did that. I feel like he could have done something to cause Lazarus to not die. I'm just vocalizing it. I'm just saying. Do you know what that means? That the idea and concept of Jesus crying over Lazarus' death or being emotionally, stirred because of Martha and Mary crying and the people crying, that it's just like his way of saying like, oh, I love these people so much. They're my friends. They're almost like family. And I let them down, or maybe I just feel bad because Lazarus died. And no, because the people's observation of Jesus would align itself with that idea. And they were wrong. So for us to assume the same would make us wrong. Why does Jesus weep? You ever ask yourself that question? I can't tell you right now. Because that would ruin scene 4. But I want you to note Jesus was troubled. The word moved in spirit is not a positive, it's a negative. In other words, if you were to say, hey, this person, they got a little upset, they got a little mad, they got a little irritated. Whoa, you're telling me that Jesus watching Mary and Martha cry and the people that were hired crying and seeing Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days, his response isn't an emotional one like, oh, I really feel for them, but it's a, bugs me. Why? Yeah, again, welcome to Jesus. Scene 4. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, negative, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone was lying against it. Remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, Lord, there is already a stench because he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they moved the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes. Let me read that one more time. Jesus raised his eyes. Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me. But because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out bound hand and foot with linen strips and with his face wrapped in cloth. Jesus said to them, unwrap him and let him go. End of scene. What is happening in this story? We finally understand, first off, Jesus is irritated. How many of you guys are comfortable with that? He's irritated at a funeral. Why? Oh, we'll get to that. He looks at them and then there is a response. He says, remove the stone. Why does he say that? Because God does miracles at times where he involves the people that don't believe in him. Can I get an amen? Yeah, he does that so that he can show them, not only am I going to do something beautiful and amazing and incredible, I am going to reveal myself to you, but guess what? You are going to be a participant in this miracle because I want you to experience all of it. So what does he do? He involves everybody that's there. You. Move the stone. It's a rolling stone, the same one that is going to cover his own grave. He rolls the stone away. And what does Martha do? Remember we talked about her earlier and I said, hold on to this. Okay, now we're moving forward. Martha said, you are the Son of God. You are here. And I know that in the end, Lazarus will be resurrected. We thought, man, Martha's really on it. Like she's having faith in Jesus. No, she's not. How do we know that? Prove it. Her response is she runs to Jesus and goes, no, what are you doing? Do not remove the stone. The smell of his body is already atrocious. Like she, if you compare the two sisters, Mary is very submissive and very much whatever Jesus wants to do, let's do. Martha is always the controller. I need to have control of my life and my reality. I know I'm speaking to some of you right now because you too have control issues. It's very hard for you to embrace Jesus as Lord when you know better than he. So you need to have control of stuff. Here, Jesus is doing something very much strong but gentle at the same time. She goes, no, Lord, do not roll away the stone. What are you doing? She's trying to take control of this. She has to be in charge of the funeral. She has to be in charge of everything. And Jesus is messing with things. And what does Jesus say? Hey, you, what did I tell you to do? What was your one job, Martha? To believe. Your job is not the outcomes. Your job is not to orchestrate this whole thing. Your job is not to do X, Y, Z or to worry about X, Y, Z. No, your job, the only one job that you have here is to believe. Trust me. And she does. She lets go of control and lets Jesus be Jesus. And now Jesus goes, now we can move on because this whole situation should have always been under my control. As it is right now. And what does Jesus do? He raises his eyes. Why? Because he's going to pray to the Father. Does he have to? No. He explains it very plainly. He goes, Father, you hear me, and I know that you hear me. I'm not saying this for my benefit. I'm saying it for everybody else who has ears to hear and eyes to see, so that they know that you sent me. Now, Jesus goes up to the tomb and in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Lazarus is short for Eleazar. Eleazar means God assists, God's help. I want to tell you something about funerals in Jewish day. They're not like the Egyptians where they were wrapped up tight and things, body parts were removed so that when there is decay and the embalmment, there is no smell. It's just simply the body decays, but it's covered in stuff to help it decay gracefully. No, in Jewish ritual, you just get wrapped up. By the way, the wrappings are extremely tight. A human person cannot unwrap themselves. These linens are made to hold you stiff as a board. And then your head is covered, which has to do with the covering of Jesus later on. When you get put into the tomb, you are covered with plants because you smell. They didn't know how to deal with this, so they just wrap the body super tight. No human being is strong enough to bust these linens. They are wrapped around you, and in between each linen, they started sticking branches of nice smelling plants because they knew at day 4, those plants have already done what they could. This body's going to smell. How does Lazarus come out? According to the original language, he comes out bound? No, he comes out free. The linen is still on him, but it has been ripped. His arms and legs are moving. He has a cover on his head, so he's probably trying to feel his way out. And here he is alive. Can I get an amen? Jesus goes, go and take off the linen, remove it from him, and set him free. Why did Jesus cry? Jesus didn't cry because he was emotional, and he didn't cry because, oh no, look, poor Lazarus. No, he knew how this was going to end. He knew Lazarus was coming back to life. Jesus wept. Why did he cry? For the same reason that he cried when he looked at Jerusalem. Ladies and gentlemen, whenever Jesus cries, pay attention to the other times that he cries. When he looked at Jerusalem, he said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I cry for you because my heart is for you. Kind of like a mother hen wants to grab its chicks and just tuck them in underneath and go, oh, babies, you're with me. I long to do that with you, but you choose to not trust in me. You choose to not believe in me. It breaks my heart because I'm doing everything within my power to establish a relationship with you, and instead you doubt, you question, and you think this is all a joke. Ladies and gentlemen, what did Jesus say to Martha and Mary? I am the resurrection and the life. Everyone is crying. Everyone's making a commotion. Why? Because they believe in some lie and not the truth. Do you know why this story exists? Because John wanted us to know that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And the way and the reason why Jesus cries is because we will live our lives as if he is not the resurrection or the life. We will live our existence as if God is not present, as if God is not producing life, as if God isn't moving, as if God isn't doing something new and beautiful. We will live our lives as if he is just a normal person. We will live our lives as if he can't do anything. We will live our lives as if he has no power, authority, or control. We will live our lives as if it's all up to us and he can't do squat. We will live as if life itself is not next to us. I know you're thinking, wow, Johnny, calm down. No, I can't calm down because we see this in every single day in every single life when we tell people, hey, trust in Jesus, meet Jesus, spend time with Jesus. And the response will be, okay, what will that do? What will that do? Are you living under a rock? Do you not realize who he is? Do you not realize why he came? He came to bring life and resurrection and life to the fullest. He came to set you free. He came to remove sin and its tyranny and its shininess so that we don't find it attractive anymore. He came to set us free from ourselves. He came to set us free emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, socially. Like he brought so much freedom. There's so much that happens in our soul. And what do? I'm just going to hire a bunch of people and cry because, okay, Jesus is here, big deal. But I mean, my life is in ruins. You just said Jesus is here, but you are focused on the reality that isn't even real? Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day that you have to make the decision. What reality would you like to live in? Because I will tell you, I don't want to live in a reality where I make Jesus cry. Because I want to live in the truth that He is the resurrection and the life. I want to see that truth implemented in my daily life, in my morning, my evening, my nighttime, in the children that God has entrusted me with, in the wife that He has entrusted me with, in the people that He has entrusted me with, in my journey, in my family, extended family, in my friends, in my random people that I meet online. Everything, everything. I want to see resurrection. I want to see life being produced and explosive, where it overtakes and removes the kingdom of evil and freedom is finally felt. Is Jesus crying over your life? Grace and peace be with you. This is the way. He is the resurrection and the life in your life. Now, live in that reality. We'll see you guys next week.